Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to bring you on a journey of VFX to VAD, a journey with Unreal Engine. Quick head count. Who is in VFX in this room? All right. Gaming and any other type of transmedia looking to switch in? Okay, cool. So to give you a little introduction, I'm Zachary Dubinsky. I am a virtual art department supervisor at Pixomondo, Toronto. And my current focuses are in our innovations and our virtual production teams. I come from a generalist background, so I've done assets, environments, look dev, supervision, but my specialty was always in lighting. I always had a heart for light. And we're going to talk about some of our key points today are going to be about what are the differences between VFX and VAD, how Unreal or how our artists transition into Unreal ecosystem, and myself, the trial by fire, and you guys are going to get some juicy, real truth about what really went down and how we switched over to that and everything that went wrong, and some real world examples of the journey. And we're going to discuss some of the resources that were very helpful to us, and then we'll give some advice along the way. So let's talk quickly about our traditional VFX pipeline. What does that look like? As you can see here from that image, Pixomondo is towards the end of a traditional production, and I like to call us a post-thought. So we're only thought of after they've wrapped up filming. It's 3 months later, we won the bid. And then, now they're going, what's going to be on this green screen and blue screen behind the talent? So it's usually mostly made up of specialists for each step of the pipeline. So you have match, move, layout, modeling, rigging, animation, look dev, lighting departments, comp. And everything is usually created in different DCCs. So like Maya, you have people working in Houdini, Blender, just a whole multitude of different DCCs that all need to kind of get funneled into one to actually render. So for instance, at Pixomondo, we use Houdini, everything gets funneled into there, and then we render it with Arnold. For those of you in VFX, iteration times can be really slow due to things having to go back upstream. So if you're in the lighting department and you get a cache and it's messed up, you have to send it all the way back up to layout so they can fix it, and then you got to wait for them to publish it, and then it's 2 days later before you're even seeing, that cache again, and you can start working on your shot. Render times are atrocious in VFX. They really suck. I was just talking to our head of CG last week, and they're working on a movie, and they're getting like 2 to 4 hour render times on a 4K movie, and you don't get that with Unreal, fortunately. And the pipelines don't usually drastically change that often. And what I mean by that is usually when we have a working pipeline, we tend to overuse it just because it's stable. And it's really expensive to change each part of that pipeline because of the specialist role and the compartmentalization of like the match, move, layout, modeling. How is it going to affect every department going down? And then I find that usually at a lot of studios, you have to kind of stay your lane. Even though if you know how to fix something, you can't fix it because you're going to go off pipe and it's like, oh, you can't render this because I don't know where this data is coming from. It's not proper. So then what is VAD? Well, VAD to us is the virtual art department, and it's a very unique department at Pixomondo, which kind of provides an A to Z solution for both VP and VFX, and from the conceptual stage all the way to final pixel. As you can see from this image, now you're going to see the difference is that Pixo is actually parallel with the art department on the production side. So we're actually in tandem with the production designers. We're engaged with the creatives like directors and DPs. And I know it says VFX vendor. I do not like to consider us a vendor at this point. We are a creative partner with them, is how I see it. Down there in the left-hand corner, you can see the virtual art department is just one component of virtual production. Virtual production kind of encompasses a bunch of stuff. It can go to virtual art department, which means like tech viz, lens scouting, location scouting, previs, or what we're kind of most well known for, which is our IC VFX and camera VFX and our LED volume walls. And it can actually also go to visual effects, like post-rendering out of Unreal. So the rise of real-time engines and first contact with Unreal Engine. So I'm going to kind of set the slate here. The year was 2020. It was a bad time for everyone, and hashtag COVID sucks. And before the COVID work boom, I like to say there was the COVID work doom, and all the productions were shut down. We had massive layoffs, not only across our industry, but all industries, the world. And it was really a tough time for everyone. And Pixomondo needed a big leap. We needed to take a risk in order to stay afloat, because all the productions were shut down. We only had the work that we had in-house at that moment, and then there was nothing. It was dry afterwards. And so our head of studio at the time, Mahmood, had this crazy idea of like, well, we had a small team working just on a very short animation film in Unreal Engine, just two people. And he's like, well, virtual production. I think this could be the next big thing. It's COVID. It kind of marries that this is like the perfect storm to take this leap. So he went to the CEO and he said, give me millions of dollars when we can't afford it, and let's take this leap and do a sink or swim situation. And so he said yes, and that's why we're all talking to you today. And we had to create, we were awarded a contract to produce virtual production environments for a little well-known show called Star Trek, if anyone's heard of it. And that continues to be our biggest client utilizing these real-time workflows today. And so this is kind of the timetable. It was August of 2020. That's when I first got introduced to Unreal and some of our team. And we had 5 months to learn Unreal before we went to go to our first production shoot. So how do you onboard to a real-time workflow? This was kind of our philosophy in the beginning. Not that it completely worked out this way, but it was to start with a small team of senior talent for this portion. So at the time, I was the head of lighting. I switched over to Unreal. Our head of DMP switched over, and we had some other heads and supervisors switch over in a very small niche team. And to test a full round trip with the engine, from being in it, out of it, and going back in it, and having things like level templates, trying to have master materials and editor utility widgets to make us comfortable with that move. And that was from those two people that were already in Unreal, but they weren't VFX artists. They just knew Unreal. And they were trying to make the move easier for us because we were traditional VFX artists coming in with bad habits, for sure. And then it was about training us not only as much as the tools, but also the philosophy and how that philosophy of Unreal is different than VFX. And then to go all in. And once the workflow was established, workflows, it was very, very rough. It was important to stick to it as much as possible. The studio knew that we were going to have a fidelity drop, with this new talent and artists coming in like myself. Obviously we sucked at Unreal at first. The fidelity dropped, but then we just had to stick to our guns and know that fidelity will come back because we're VFX artists. We know what looks good. We just have to get the engine, under our arms and be comfortable with it. And then, most importantly, what you're going to hear me talk about so much today is trust the process. That's kind of going to be my slogan of this entire presentation. So we started in 4.2.6 back in August of 2020. We opened a blank canvas and now what? Now what do we do? Well, as typical with Unreal, it compiles 100 bajillion shaders, and we were even like, what the hell is compiling shaders? But really, it was a really overwhelming feeling, just opening up a new software, and it was like being on an alien planet. You're just like, I know how to do the X in this software, but now how do I do it in Unreal? And that required a mindset shift. And, I wish I had this knowledge at the beginning of this journey. That would have led to a way smoother learning curve for myself and my other colleagues and put us in the right headspace and would have made our transition to UE simplified. So if you're thinking about transitioning to Unreal Engine, you haven't jumped in from VFX, this is a really important slide that I want you to take away. And we're learning a game engine. And Unreal is a game engine first, and that's unavoidable. So you must learn game dev philosophy and workflows. And Unreal already has like a steep learning curve. So you're gonna have a really difficult time if you skip this step in understanding game dev workflows, because you're gonna have a difficult time troubleshooting and problem solving, which is gonna lead to frustration like it did to us, and your conscience saying, I can't do this, just quit now, you suck. And you're looking at yourself in the mirror like, why did I take this journey? And for me, I think the most important thing that you can do if you're just jumping into Unreal or if you're wanting to learn a new system or component is to learn one system at a time. And Unreal has so many different components to it, from like lighting, blueprints, modeling, materials, rigging, animation, metahuman, effects, optimization, rendering, lighting. But you need to understand all of these components before you can call Unreal a home. And so by doing this, you need to, I would encourage you to start on small projects, learn one system, and make those projects with a purpose. My purpose of this project is to learn blueprints or lighting or optimization. And don't try to do everything all at once, because you're gonna get overwhelmed and you're gonna get flustered, and you're just gonna end up like me, which is bitter sometimes, if you can't figure something out. And I really wish I would have taken these steps, and I've tried to course correct myself to adapt to my own philosophy now of it when learning something new. Now, another thing that you have to understand is that you have to understand learning the balancing of quality versus performance. Because again, you're in a game engine, and you have to know what's acceptable quality and performance that you're gonna get for the quality that you're gonna have. So, Unreal Engine only has so much piece of the pie. You're cramming all this stuff on the GPU, and you can only have so much of the pie go to lighting, to shadows, to ray tracing or volumetrics. And you really have to understand that you're limited by the metrics of your hardware. So fortunately, 4090 people can create really cool stuff, and 2080 people have to cry and sacrifice fidelity, right, in order to get the performance. And I know Unreal has limitations, but I would say the biggest limitation is that hardware limitations is what holds back making the best product in Unreal. So once we have just like infinite VRAM, that's gonna be a beautiful day. Some of the biggest hurdles in the beginning that we had was proceduralism, working with virtual environments. We're creating 360-degree environments, so filmmakers and creatives can go anywhere and look anywhere, and it has to stand up and look good. Lighting workflows with GPU light mask, CPU light mask, what was baking, optimization, and a big one that I think no one really knows about is client relationships. So working with clients and creatives at the beginning of the production phase, we were no longer a post thought. We had influence on best practices and what was achievable creatively with them in parallel. And it was really tough trying to have them make decisions early and commit to them. They're so used to just making decisions afterwards in VFX and just like kind of throwing darts at a board until until something sticks, and it's very expensive. And we're like, no, you have to know what this is gonna look like, because it's going on a volume and you're pointing a camera at it. And you wanna have everything in camera VFX, right? You wanna save money. So we had to manage their real-time expectations. And the challenge with that is that they expect instant changes and feedback, because Unreal operates in real time. So, if they're new to Unreal, they're not gonna understand the technology's capabilities and limitations. So we had to take time to try to educate them about Unreal, explaining how real-time workflow differs from traditional VFX and the trade-offs of the fidelity versus performance that they're going to experience, especially on an LED volume. And we had to set very clear expectations with them up front. Another thing that was very difficult with clients was terminologies. They had different terminologies from the production side. We had different terminologies from VFX and Unreal. We said, oh, you have to do a light bake. And they're like, what the hell is a light bake? And what's the purpose of it? So we had to, explain these and why they're important and why you must commit to them. There's creative and technical constraints. And then, of course, what everyone is used to, no matter what type of media that you're in, is scope creep. So with the scope creep, Unreal's fast, real-time feedback loop encouraged our clients to kind of keep pushing for more changes and additional features last minute. And because Unreal makes it feel more accessible, which that's true. And this can lead to scope creep where, the projects extend beyond the original plan, you're spending more money and you're making less money. And we were hard victims of this in the very beginning. It took us a lot to kind of get our bearings and set boundaries without, trying not to piss them off as best as we could. And so we had to set clear milestones and deliveries and when and why they must occur and, managing additional requests and to prevent continuous adjustments from derailing the project. And then most importantly, too, was the collaboration. So with the collaboration, we required, the challenge was it required close collaboration with multiple departments, including VFX, the production teams, the on-set teams. And this could be a challenge if your client kind of silos you off and doesn't fully intake, your suggestions and kind of considers you a part of the team. And so we had to really advocate for integration between the departments early on in the project. We had to set up regular occurring meetings. We are a part of production. We're a creative partner, and we're not a vendor. And any client that doesn't support this, I guarantee you, will not have a successful project. And I know the trial by fire just keeps, wanting to show up. But how did we have to learn? Okay, now for the gimmick. Well, it was by trial by fire. We were literally walking flaming humans, just being thrown into Unreal and saying, figure it out. So for this example, I'm going to show you a case study of Moonlet Mausoleum. This is from one of the first batches of environments that we did on Star Trek Discovery Season 4. And this environment is the one that broke us and really set the trajectory for future environment workflows of do's and don'ts. So let's talk about why it broke us. And as you can stare by Tight Butt Cheek Man here, it was a massive environment, tons of details. There was high-res meshes that needed to hold up. There was 3 hotspot areas. By hotspots, I mean there was a bottom level of this environment, there was an elevator ride up, and there was a top level of this environment. And 360 degrees of this environment needed to look good no matter where we were. And that required a lot of different techniques and cheats, and it demoralized us a lot, that's for sure. And so in the beginning, we were told by, I'm going to call him out, Josh Karekis, our head of VP. He said, we have plenty of Quadro 8000s on the wall. Don't worry about anything. You have room for performance, so turn on all of the fancy stuff. And so we're like, cool. All right, well, we're a small group of Unreal artists. We don't really have any asset help, so let's use the traditional VFX asset team. UDIM textures, everything. 4K, everything. Me coming from lighting, I'm like, oh, ray tracing. Let's turn on global illumination, reflections, SSS, shadows. I was like, wow, this is cool. High-res meshes, volumetric fog. And this was one of our work in progress images of the results. So, everything was looking great. We have real-time reflections, GI, shadows, and I was like, eat dirt VFX. Unreal is awesome. I'm never going back. Don't ever contact me again. So we sent over this to the stage team. They launched it up on the wall, and it was running at 2 frames a second. And that was really concerning. I was like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. And really, that was a huge reality check and frankly, a slap in the face. So we were panicking. We were in major panic mode. Earlier, I said that we kind of bet the farm on this. Well, the farm was burning, okay? If this didn't go well, it would have been unfavorable outcome for us. So, we had producers asking us, what are we going to do? We have to shoot this in a couple weeks. We had the stage side tech artists screaming, turn off all ray tracing, bake everything down now. And we were already planning contingencies with the client saying, hey, look, we'll fix all of your shots in post because we know how to, if this goes poorly, free of charge, which is not a good business model. And so we needed the help. So we reached out to Papa Epic for help, and we had to create a plan of action with them, a step-by-step process on how can we optimize this thing down and overall trust the process of game development workflow. And I don't know why we went against game development workflow in the beginning. I felt like we were, those punk-ass teenagers that knew better than our parents, and we were just like, well, we don't need to listen to any of this. We're just going to do what we're going to do. So we reached out to our assigned account manager at the time, Joe Finlayson, who now works with us. And he set us up with a call with Matt Ostale. And if you don't know who Matt Ostale is, you should know who Matt Ostale is, because he is the master of optimization. And so we had this plan, and we just needed to trust the process. But these were the words of Matt Ostale in 30 seconds of everything that was wrong in our scene.
One of the warnings I get when I open this streaming pool over budget. When I first opened this scene, it was like 130 milliseconds. Overlapping stationary lights, texture streaming pool, LOD screen sizes, UDIMs. More than 50% of your screen is using subsurface profile, and it's very expensive. We are pushing the boundaries of this technology.
So that was a list of problems. Texture streaming pools over budget, LOD screen sizes, UDIMs everywhere, ray tracing, SSS everywhere. And it took them 6 hours to open the scene on their computers, only for it to crash on their machines, and they could barely even get it open. And we actually had to screen share because they couldn't even get the project running on their machines. So we were like, whoa, this was a lot of information. They kind of laid out the framework of listen, you have to take these steps of game development workflow. And we're not going to do the work for you. Figure it out. We're kind of telling you how it needs to be done. So let's take a look at how we put these things into practice and, again, trusted the process. So the cause of our texture streaming pool over budget was, where did all of our VRAM go? Well, that was because we had 45 UDIM assets, all in the scene. I know, very amateurish, very VFX, just UDIM everything. And so we had to figure out how do we get this, how do we optimize this down? So we started using procedural shaders and texture setups as often as we could, different RGB masks to help us support variety. And really the only unique map that we ended up keeping from the one UDIM tileable image was the normal map and RGB mask. Those were kind of our only unique maps. Everything else was procedural. And if you guys take a close look at those images, we're actually getting better fidelity out of the one UDIM procedurally textured, shaded material on those statues. And this saved us on texture memory and shader complexity and allowed for that performance to go elsewhere, gave us a lot of flexibility and control to change things on set and with the creatives. So this was, step one of a very eye-opening way to optimize our scene down. And here's are some more examples of just different assets, and you can see just the unique RGB mask, but everything else is procedural. So the major component number 2 of our problem was bake lighting. Well, the challenge was that our client fell in love with the entire ray trace scene. So FML. Now what do we do? Well, now we had to mimic that entire look in a performant way, which was baking the lighting down. So we were in 426. We were using CPU light mask baking. The problem with CPU light mask baking, if any of you used it, there's no interactive preview and to understand what the bake's going to look like. And if you, there's no correlation with path tracing or the ray tracing. Once you bake it, it doesn't look anything like it. And on this environment, we were having 8-hour bake times on a single machine with CPU light mask. So you can see, you can probably guess the iteration time. We were man, okay, maybe VFX is better. So this is where we kind of thought, again, what are we doing with our lives? So, we hooked up a number of P620 ThinkStations for a swarm network farm of 10 machines, and we got those render times down to about an hour for a production bake. Still not the best, but still not the worst. With CPU Lightmass, again, it's slower turnaround times. You usually have to have a swarm network if you want to make it efficient for giant scenes. Any dynamic lights that we had in the scene, we turned cache shadows off, and then we tried to mimic light sources through color correct regions, decals, bakelite UVs, reflection captures, et cetera, et cetera. And we learned our lesson with ray tracing at the time, and we said r.raytracing.force force all ray tracing effects to 0, so we didn't make that mistake. And with the rest of everything else, again, we were only 3 weeks out from shooting when we encountered that call with Matt Ostole, so we didn't have a lot of time. We just had to fake it till we made it. So last minute everything, we reprojected mini columns, rock piles, and things with hotspots from the hotspot area for optimization. We had last minute kind of DMP, overpaints and reprojected, and decals. We merged a lot of stuff to proxy mesh. Those statues that were 45 UDIMs were LOD 0, then they were LOD 2, and then they went into imposters. We switched from flipbooks, or from Niagara particles to flipbooks to cut down on our translucency overlap and our overdraw. And we just had to trust the process. Another thing I want to mention is that we totally forgot that we had to scan assets from the set, and we didn't even budget that in. So we were like getting down significantly. So we went from 137 milliseconds down to 57 milliseconds to 1 week before the shoot, we were at 10 milliseconds in the scene. And if there's one tattoo that I'm going to get on my body, it is going to be 6.86 milliseconds, because that was our target metric to run a 2-camera out of projection shoot at performance for full screen resolutions in both frustrums. And that's 145 FPS for anyone who's naughty that uses frame rate. And we were almost there. We went from 137 to 10 1 week before the shoot. Crazy when you actually do it correct. Now, one thing I want to touch upon is that while this is happening with the scene and we're actually getting it under wraps and we're getting the performance under control, there's another thing that's happening in virtual production and ICVFX at the time, about a week before the actual shoot day, and that's the pre-light and the blend day. So as you can see here, we have the practical set in the left-hand image there of Moonlet Mausoleum. And you can see it's a very complex set. There's a lot of debris, crap everywhere. There's stairs that need to blend seamlessly into the virtual environment. And we had to start with our pre-light days. And pre-light day means the DP comes in, the talent sits right in the middle of the set, or usually a stand-in with the same skin tone. They take all the practical lighting and they light that talent to make the set and the skin tone to look good, while balancing it with the LED volume light that's interacting as ambient lighting in there. And they go, okay, that's 2 days of lighting. This is how I like it. If there's any changes in the virtual environment, like, hey, I want a light back there. I was secretly biting my lip, because then you have to go home and re-render, or not re-render, but re-bake. And that was very time consuming, because at the time we were such a small team that we were kind of working double shifts. We were artists, and then we were going on set and being operators, and then we were going back home and then working back on the art, and then we were sleeping for 2 hours. And it was very brutal. And then after the pre-light's done and the director's happy, and don't forget, this is 3 areas: a lower level, elevator right up, top level. Those are 3 different light scenarios. That means we have to do 3 different blends, meaning that we have to now, the established lighting that's on the set and with the environment, now we have to blend that seamlessly from the practical into the digital. And that's challenging. And that creates last minute changes, and it's team no sleep for us. So here's a little screen recording that I found on my hard drive. This is 2021 of February the 10th. And you can see down to the wire from 9 o'clock all the way working to early AM, probably before I shut it off and said, this is ridiculous, why am I screen recording? we had messages from all of our artists, there's some intersecting, last thing, okay, I painted it out. Just a heads up, I'm doing a tweak on the archway. And then Muja coming back saying, all right, it's all ready to go. And I pushed it to Perforce and, me going, woot, in there. And this is what that timeline looked like leading up to the shoot. So the day before the shoot, we had our last blend day, and that was from 9 a.m. in the morning to 9 p.m. And then we had notes from that blend day. There were still notes from the DP. There were still things to address, and mostly it was performance still. We still weren't at 6.86 milliseconds yet, the day before the shoot. And so took an hour car ride home, started back at 10, did that screen recording, and from 10 to 5 a.m., we just worked on the environment, started crunching more stuff down, baking stuff down, merging more stuff, projecting more stuff. And by 5 o'clock, we sent the CPU light mask bake to the farm. I took an hour nap. At 6 a.m., it was done. Woke up, guess what? 6.8 milliseconds, heck yeah. And we were performant, sent that to Perforce, sent that to the stage team. I brushed my teeth, TMI, I did not shower, and I got my butt back to the stage at 7, and by 8 a.m., we were shooting Moonlet Mausoleum. And that was the result of Moonlet. Now, a funny story while this is playing is when I was on set, and I was an operator, and my VFX soup at the time was an operator as well, Nathan. I fell asleep at the operating station, on set, in front of the director, in front of the DP, and that's kind of like a no-no on set. And so Nathan elbows me into the ribs, and he says, dude, you gotta wake up. And I woke up and I looked him straight in the eyes and I said, F off. And then I went back to sleep. So this was, we felt a sense of freedom, our first taste of freedom that, okay, wow, we can actually pull this crap off. And I think a little scene from Braveheart kind of sums it up perfectly.
But they'll never take our freedom!
They seem quite optimistic to me.
And we were very optimistic. This single environment is kind of what catapulted us and launched us into the stratosphere of understanding the do's and don'ts, and really gave us a platform of stability, of future endeavors, workflows, and to take even more risk. So what I want to touch on is what we learned from that was profile, okay? Understand where your bottlenecks are occurring, what are the game thread, what are the render threads doing, stat GPU, stat detail, stat unit graph, the GPU visualizer, Unreal Insights. Understand what is happening in your scene and address that early. Do not leave that to the end, otherwise you're gonna be just like us, and I want you to learn from our mistakes. After Moonlit as well, we switched from 426 to 427, which was a huge update for us. We utilized GPU light mask, which was way more stable than 426. And we still use this on some of our environments today if we're running on a stage that has lower end hardware. And what the benefit of this was, if you look in the top right-hand corner of the images, path tracing and GPU light mask, if you take a look at those, they should look exactly the same. And what I don't think many people know is that GPU light mask under the hood is actually path tracing. And you can bake that down, as long as you have sufficient light map UVs, which light map UVs are fun. I know everyone's in Lumen, but optimization. But in terms of a direct diffuse and indirect diffuse capacity, they match 1 for 1. Now, one thing that will never match is path trace reflections and specularity. You still have to fake those through either Lumen ray tracing, reflection captures, or screen space reflections. Another advantage of this is that when you're using GPU light mask, if in the project settings you turn on virtual light maps, you can actually enable an interactive lighting preview mode and click on bake what you see. So as you're doing the light bake, it'll actually interactively show the light bake building inside of the viewport. Now, what we do personally at Pixomondo is we use the path tracer as our alternative viewer. So we light everything in path tracing, then we bake it. And then we just try to bring those reflections back as best that we can to match it. You also get faster bake times with it, so 30 minutes to 1 hour production bakes on a single GPU. You can SLI 2 GPUs to bake it. There's no need for a swarm network, and the biggest thing is we were able to turn around bakes on set with our clients. So, hey, Mr. DP, go for a coffee, go for lunch, and we'll have your bake in half an hour. You got to work around the gotchas. There's, every system has its quirks. As you can see there that I wrote, GPU light mask doesn't support, pixel depth offset, world position offset, indirect lighting intensity controls, but you just got to work around those. So this led to smoother sailing. We kept more tasks in Unreal, and we started to do less cheating in Unreal. Those projection methods and DMP overpaints. As environments went on, we actually did away with them. And nowadays, we do everything Unreal. We don't cheat at all. We just keep it all in engine. So with each new environment, that provided a challenge and a template for us. So at the beginning, we had nothing to go off of. It's like we went Moonlet, and then they want an engineering room with a red alert version that a missile hits it and then it explodes and there's chasing lights and sparks dance and fall on the floor, and they want control on when that's timed, and they want to adjust the BPM of the lights and all this crap. But that's the challenge of first working with virtual production. But once you've gone through all those environments and all those scenarios, you have a catalog of what you want. So, we built prefab templates, configurations of those environments, like, oh, this client wants interactive XYZ. Well, we'd done that environment, 6 months ago, and here's a template for it. And so that allowed us a lot more time to focus on other things. Other artists were able to come on board, we were able to hire, and they were able to kind of take over, the mundane processes that we were doing manually, because we had templates and all these prefab libraries, and it allowed us to focus on other things like post VFX, round 2. This is our time to shine because these are our roots. VFX, you're in our house now. So the biggest difference with VFX traditionally and Unreal is that, out of VFX, you can get a lot of passes. There's the Arnold AOV render passes. There's a ton of them. And in Unreal, it's just a little tiny list. And so what we found is that, we were trying to mimic VFX, which we have, and there's a time and place for that if we're doing complex VFX in Unreal Engine. But if time allows and budget allows, we try to do fewer AOV passes, and we do more in the engine. If you're working real time, why not make the changes in the engine? And why, keep it in comp plan like we traditionally do in VFX, or tend to, depending on your studio. So this led to more propagatable templates and workflows, and seniors and leads were able to make parent templates of shots, which was an easy order of operation for juniors to pick up on child shots and basically mimic a VFX workflow inside of Unreal. And so this image showcases our first initial pass at our post-rendering pipeline. 50+ pages of info of how to do custom passes and render layers, and this was all done manually. Wow, fun. And the goal was to say, okay, so all of this manual work exists. Now, how do we automate all of this? And this was critical because we did a massive amount of VFX work, probably that people don't know, in Unreal for Avatar: The Last Airbender in Netflix. So there was a number of layers and jobs that was a lot, and we had to automate this because setting that up for how many shots that we had was like hundreds of shots, was not gonna work manually. So working with my UE developer at the time, Christian, he was helping me out. He probably hates me because I was the bane of his existence wanting this. These were kind of the AOV and the render passes that we were able to get out of Unreal. And we were able to build our own deadline submission tool, and we were rendering all of our shots on deadline on a GPU farm in Unreal. And it was fantastic because everyone is kind of familiar with this if you're in VFX. So when Avatar came around, we had 2 environments, the Throne Room and the Royal Academy. And at the time, you can see the total frame counts there for the Throne Room and Royal Academy, 8,000 frames for Academy, 3,000 some frames for Throne Room. And we were getting an average of all those passes in this previous slide of about 14 minutes a frame average across all those render layers and passes at 4K in Unreal. Show me Arnold doing all those passes in 14 minutes. I don't think so. But the problem is that we were limited by the amount of nodes that we had. So we only had 2 nodes. And if you do the math, well, it's going to take us 17 days if we were to render all those frames with all those passes, and 34 days for Royal Academy. So with any typical company, you have to write a proposal and you have to say, please, please give me more money and resources so I can actually get this out and your show doesn't tank. And you don't want to piss off Netflix, do you? With the proposed resources, what we ended up doing was we didn't actually bring in any new hardware. We utilized every single VAD artist and VFX artist graphics card on their machines. We basically turned their machines into a farm overnight. And that allowed us to drop our days. If we really needed it, we could have said, take a day off, everyone, and render Throne Room in a day. And 2.5 days, that could have been a weekend for the entire Royal Academy. And on Strange New Worlds, this is kind of what those custom passes look like. You can see there's fog, light passes, effects, all the good stuff, crypto matte. And this is what it kind of looks like, kind of put together if you were to recompile it from Unreal back to Beauty. All right, so flash forward to April of 2022, UE5 releases, creating tons of buzz. Since the reveal in 2020, we were frothing with rabies out of our mouths to get hands on this. And, it offered big promises, nanite, lumen, virtual shadows. And so the typical question was, well, when are we going to switch? And ideally, we would have a sprint session and test all the systems and the viability, test it on the stage, does it work with in-display, sign off on the risk as a group and a unit, and then greenlight it for launch in production. So at the time, we were working on Alien Planet, which was in Star Trek Discovery Season 5. This was the VAD concept artwork for it. And you can see there's a bunch of spires that are rocky with a cloud bank. They're coming out of a cloud bank on a planet with waterfalls. I don't know which way is up or down in this, but lots of large rocks, just kind of like a nanite, sandwich for megascans, right? So we were like, man, this would be the perfect project to work on. And as we were progressing through the environment, we were starting to, we were still in 427, and we were starting to see sacrifices in the details we were having to do because it was becoming heavy in order to hit the performance. So we were LODing things down aggressively, especially now that we had this huge cloud bank in Unreal. And we were like, man, should we switch or shouldn't we switch? And so initially we were like, okay, maybe we initiate a sprint session to make sure that there's proper testing before we move the project over to 5.0. And so we said, nah. And we switched to Unreal Engine 5 to utilize Nanite 3 weeks before the shoot. That seems to be a pattern, 3 weeks before, 3 weeks before. And this is a lesson on how to shoot yourself in the foot 101 and create major stress and heart palpitations. So we encountered some major show-stopping bugs, and we really were walking on thin glass with this one. So once we converted our entire scene to Nanite, we were like, this is awesome. We're getting all the fidelity we want, the performance. We're happy with the changes. Nanite's awesome. And then GPU Lightmass came along and had to ruin our happiness. And when we did bakes, you can see at origin 000, it was baking fine. As soon as you moved any spire, any object away from origin, we were getting GPU Lightmass bake artifacts. And so we submitted a UDN ticket. We sent the scene back to, again, Papa Epic. Please help us. All hands on deck. This might have been a mistake. And 2 weeks later, they still couldn't find a fix. We were both still investigating. There's still no fix, and now we were like, okay, how are we going to hide this? How are we going to hide this from the production? How can we get around this? Are we going to have to use decals, plans, volumetrics, light maps, or bake the lighting offline, or make it just movable geometry? And so here's a message of me saying, like, the client hasn't called it out. Only a few of us know that these artifacts live somewhere. Maybe we can get away with it. And so I was basically saying, it's something worth investigating, but I'm going to shut this down, and we're just going to try to get this done before we go to film next week. Well, guess what? The solution to all of our problems 1 week before filming was one specific NVIDIA driver. Yes, we tested 20-ish drivers one by one to see if we had a successful hit, and it was that damn 512. He was the one, and it provided us stable light bakes in our test scene, but in our actual persistent level with all the spires, it was still crashing. So one last Hail Mary pass, Josh reached out to me. He said, Zach, I have a workaround from Juan Gomez here at Epic in their virtual production. He said, use volumetric light map detail cell to 500. I was like, what? But the default's like 200, isn't it? And then you have Christian going, oh, I can hear the excitement. And I tested it with 200 cells, crash, crash. 500 cells, no crash, no crash. And then I said, well, hot diggity dog, we're in business. And this was the result of Alien Planet. Running in 5.0, full nanite, with all the props. We got all the benefits of nanite and GPU light mass, no artifacts, thank God. All right, and all this leads to Pixo and to who we are today, right? All of these challenges that we overcame, these risks we took, and we're just a lean team of talented generalists that have fostered an environment of growth and innovation and creativity, and most importantly, every one of these individuals are risk takers, okay? That is one of the most important factors and aspects that has kept us on the bleeding edge of Unreal, and technology and competitiveness, is that we just jump in and we take a risk and we figure it out. And this only doesn't translate to bigger companies like ourselves, but translates, to all of you working on your personal projects, your personal endeavors. You have to take risk in order to fail and succeed, or you succeed. But you're going to learn from your failures, you're going to learn from your successions, and it's just going to make you overall a better artist in the Unreal ecosystem. So if you haven't already taken the leap in Unreal, please jump into Unreal today. It's not too late. And even if you're in Unreal Engine and you haven't learned one component of it, you can still start today. Just go home and say, I've always wanted to learn blueprints, but I always put it on the back burner. I'm just going to start a project with one purpose, that's going to be blueprints, and I'm going to learn that system and master it and move on to the next and the next. If you're just new to Unreal, or you're thinking about jumping in from VFX, just embrace the real-time technology mindset shift. Really understand that it's a game engine, and you have to understand that first, and that you have to understand game dev workflow philosophies. And your ecosystem, once you learn all of these components in Unreal, are going to become a home. Unreal will become a home to you. You'll be comfortable with it. As always, experiment, mess stuff up, break stuff. We did it. You can do it too. At least, hopefully it won't cost you lots of money if you mess up. And then never stop learning and innovate. And so, which leads me to so many different learning resources that Unreal has. And I know some of these are going to be like, duh, Zach, like this is so obvious. But I find that they're the most often overlooked because there's just so much gold in there. So Epic's Unreal Learning Library, this is a really good resource for you to get your feet wet with even your first hours in Unreal Engine. There's tons of content in there for intermediate and even advanced users. You just got to do some searching. The Unreal 5.4 documentation, I know you might think that this is probably boring, but I promise you if you're patient enough and you read these documentations and you bookworm it a bit, there's a plethora of gold in there, from console variables, optimization techniques, and each component of what Unreal Engine is. The Unreal Engine forums, lots of helpful feedback threads there. So if you're, like topics like nanite or GPU light mass or substrate, follow those threads, bookmark them, and follow them. Because if you read them through the beginning, you're going to see what people, what problems people have had. And usually later down in the forum post, you'll see the solutions. And it's an excellent source to kind of keep on top of what currently is a problem and what has been a problem. The Unreal Engine YouTube channel, tons of great sessions on there. Specifically, if you search for Matt Ostole, Chris Murphy, Juan Gomez, they have tons of content in there. Tons of optimization, best practices, and they'll get you up to speed really, really fast. Follow Chris Murphy's Twitter as well. I follow it. Sometimes, he writes back to someone that has a problem, and then there's like this golden tip or CVAR that solves an issue down in his messages. I'm like, man, I'm glad I'm part of Twitter. And I said Twitter, not X, Twitter. It'll always be Twitter. The Unreal Source Discord channel used to be called Unreal Slackers. I personally like that name more, but they renamed it. So there's going to be a wealth of information and content on there. It's a community of Unreal artists. They have different, subtopics of nanite, cinematics, all that good stuff. If you use the search function, tons of helpful stuff in there. Most likely someone has asked the same question that you're having. You just got to search it. Sean Comley, his YouTube channel, he's a senior solutions architect at Epic. He has a lot of great content on, movie render graph and some more of movie render queue stuff. And his texture streaming video in particular is a very good knowledge bomb if you want to learn about texture streaming. The Unreal Engine subreddit. Well, they're very, useful things in there, but they're in random threads. So I like to consider Unreal subreddit like a casino, and it's a slot machine. And you might get something helpful, but once you do, you're like, man, this is a jackpot. And lastly, if you have some Unreal experience under your belt or VFX, and you're very serious about the world of virtual production, we have the Pixo and Seneca Polytechnic Virtual Production Academy that is offering, brand new courses and curriculums. It's a 12-week experience of VAD courses, and I would only suggest if you take this if you're very curious and serious about going into virtual production, and you have some basic Unreal knowledge under your belt. Great resource. We have Joe, our head of training, here as well. He's waving there in the corner. So if you have any questions about that, you can talk to Joe after this. And I gave you a QR code to all those resources. So sorry if you took those pictures. All of those sites, all of the feedback threads that I just talked about, and even more blogs and optimization posts that I found very helpful that you can follow. Thank you so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of the fest, and I'll see you all at the party tonight. Thanks.